Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a really dramatic series of events from the ancient city of Ephesus. And we're not looking at this as a sermon, but more like a case study, a fascinating look at social and economic disruption.
So let's start with a big question. What happens when a truly transformative new idea crashes head-on into a system that's built on tradition, on magic, and maybe most importantly, on money?
To get what happens next, we first have to get the lay of the land. You see, Ephesus wasn't just any old city. It was basically a powder keg just waiting for a spark.
And you really have to understand just how interconnected everything was there. I mean, yeah, it was a huge port city, a center for trade, but its whole identity, its culture, and especially its economy were all wrapped up in the great temple of the goddess Artemis and this thriving market for magical spells and items. This wasn't just a belief system, it was a powerful, powerful business model.
Now into this very complex, very entrenched system walks a man named Paul. And he brings with him a disruptive new force that's about to challenge the very idea of what power even is in Ephesus.
So the story goes that these absolutely extraordinary things started happening through Paul. Healings so profound, they justified explanation. This showed a kind of power that you couldn't buy, you couldn't conjure it with rituals or potions. It was direct, it was authentic, and for a city that ran on transactional magic, this was something else entirely.
Well, you know, wherever there's real power, you can bet imitators are not far behind. And in come this group known as the Seven Sons of Sceva. They were basically traveling exorcists, and they saw what Paul was doing and thought, hey, we can do that too. They tried to use the name of Jesus like it was a new magic word, you know? Like a new spell to add to their collection, but without any real belief or understanding behind it.
And this is where you see the huge difference, right? Paul's power was authentic. It came from his actual faith. The sons? Theirs was just a hollow imitation. They used the right words, sure, they'd say the Jesus whom Paul proclaims, but there was no substance there. They were treating a name like an incantation, not a relationship.
And the response they supposedly got was, well, it was chilling, and it totally exposed their lack of real authority in front of everyone. The spirit they were trying to command actually turned on them, making it painfully clear that a name is not a magic spell. They ended up running out of the house, beaten and humiliated.
Okay, so this very public, very embarrassing failure of the imitators, it had this unexpected and massive chain reaction that rippled across the entire city, leading to this incredibly dramatic public display.
Yeah, this whole incident was a huge turning point. It showed people in a really stark way the difference between real spiritual power and the cheap imitations they were used to. And the result was this seismic shift in public conviction. People were suddenly seeing things in a whole new light.
And what followed was just stunning. In this massive public display, people who had practiced sorcery and magic started bringing out their expensive scrolls and their magic books, and they burned them. All of them. The estimated value? A staggering 50,000 silver coins. I mean, just stop and think about the sheer scale of that sacrifice for a second. This was not some small symbolic gesture. This was a massive economic statement. We're talking about an amount of money equal to many, many years of wages for a regular worker just going up in smoke. People were literally burning their most valuable assets. It was a very public and very costly way of cutting ties with their past.
But as this new belief started to spread and really take hold, the old system began to fight back. And this was not going to be a friendly theological debate. No, this was the system's own immune response kicking in to fight what it saw as a direct threat.
And the resistance found its leader in a man named Demetrius. He was a silversmith, and his entire livelihood, and the livelihood of a lot of other craftsmen, was directly tied to making and selling silver shrines of Artemis.
So, Demetrius rallies the other craftsmen, and he's smart about it. He frames his whole argument around piety and civic pride, right? He claims their great goddess is being dishonored. But let's be real, the underlying motive was all about money. His bottom line, and theirs, was in serious trouble.
And his speech worked like a charm. It ignited a citywide riot by perfectly mixing that financial anxiety with religious fanaticism. The situation just blew up. It got chaotic, fast, and the whole thing spiraled out of control, ending up in the city's main public arena.
So how did the chaos finally end? Not with a religious argument, but with some very shrewd politics. A city official steps in and reminds the mob of a power that was far greater than their goddess Artemis, Rome. Just the threat of the Roman authorities getting involved was enough to dissolve the riot, just like that.
Okay, so what's the big picture here? What can we take away from all this? Well, the entire episode is this timeless, fascinating example of a fundamental conflict that, honestly, we see repeated throughout history.
When you really boil it all down, the opposition to Paul and his companions wasn't just about what they believed. They were attacked because their beliefs were becoming bad for business. This new faith was a direct threat to the city's entire economic foundation.
And you know, this pattern, where financial interests just completely override incredible opportunities for human transformation, it appears elsewhere. The source material draws a direct line to another story where an entire town was way more concerned about their lost livestock than the fact that a man had just been freed from his torment. It's profit over people.
At the end of the day, this ancient story is a perfect illustration of a timeless truth. Systems, whether they're economic, social, or religious, they will almost always react, sometimes violently, when their core foundations, and especially their revenue streams, are challenged. We still see the same pattern today, right? Think about legacy industries fighting tooth and nail against disruptive new technologies.
And that leaves us with a final thought. When a disruptive truth shows up in our own lives or in our own society, how do we respond? What's the first thing we instinctively move to protect? It's a question that is just as relevant for us today as it was for the people in ancient Ephesus.